I remember that day like it was painted in my memory with colors I couldn't forget. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday, another ordinary walk home from my shift at the bookstore. Headphones in, mind wandering through thoughts that didn't really matter. The autumn air had that crisp edge to it, the kind that makes you pull your jacket a little tighter. I was thinking about whether I had enough groceries to last the week, whether my landlord would finally fix the leaking faucet, mundane things that filled my mundane life. Then I saw her. At first it was just movement in my peripheral vision, something that didn't quite fit the peaceful evening scene. I pulled out one earbud and that's when I heard the voices. Harsh, mocking, mean. In the corner of the parking lot, near the dumpsters where the streetlight barely reached, an elderly woman stood with her back against the brick wall. 3 guys surrounded her. Couldn't have been older than 25, wearing those expressions that made my stomach turn. The kind of expressions that said they knew exactly what they were doing and didn't care who saw. One of them had her purse in his hand, holding it just out of her reach like some sick game. Another kept pushing her shoulder, not hard enough to knock her down but enough to keep her off balance. The third one just laughed, recording the whole thing on his phone. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I'm not a brave person. Never have been. In high school I was the kid who avoided confrontation, who took the long way around to dodge the bullies in the hallway. I'm 23 years old, barely scraping by on minimum wage, and I've never thrown a punch in my life. But something in that moment made my feet move forward instead of away. Hey, the word came out of my mouth before my brain could stop it. Leave her alone. All 3 of them turned to look at me. The one with the phone lowered it slowly, a grin spreading across his face like I'd just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. Oh look, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. We got ourselves a hero. My hands were shaking so badly I had to shove them in my pockets. My voice cracked when I spoke again, but I forced the words out anyway. I said leave her alone. I'm calling the police. I pulled out my phone, fingers fumbling with the screen. I didn't actually know if I could dial before they reached me, but I held it up like a weapon anyway. The guy with the purse, tall, wearing a stained hoodie, took a step toward me. You really want to get involved in this, man? You really want to make this your problem? Everything in my body screamed at me to run. My legs felt like water. My throat was so tight I could barely breathe. But I looked past him at the elderly woman and I saw the fear in her eyes, and I knew I couldn't walk away. Yeah, I said, surprised by how steady my voice suddenly sounded. I really do. For a moment, just a heartbeat, nobody moved. The tension hung in the air like a taut string about to snap. Then the guy with the phone cursed under his breath. This isn't worth it, man. Let's just go. The one with the purse threw it on the ground with a disgusted noise, and all 3 of them walked away, throwing angry looks over their shoulders but not stopping. I watched them until they disappeared around the corner, until I was absolutely sure they were gone. Only then did I let myself breathe. I turned to the elderly woman. She had slid down the wall and was sitting on the ground now, one hand pressed against her knee, the other clutching her chest. Her gray hair had come loose from its bun, and in the dim light she looked so fragile it hurt. Are you okay? I knelt beside her, reaching out a hand to help her up. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I felt like those dark eyes could see straight through to every secret I'd ever kept. There was something ancient and knowing in that gaze, something that made me feel like a child being examined. You're a good person, she said softly, taking my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Not many people would have done what you just did. I couldn't just walk past, I said, helping her to her feet. That wouldn't have been right. She dusted off her coat, expensive material, I noticed now, probably worth more than my entire wardrobe, and picked up her purse. For a long moment she just stood there studying my face like she was memorizing it. Then she did something strange. She opened her purse, pulled out an old envelope. The paper yellowed with age, and pressed it into my palm. What's this? I asked, confused. An address, she said simply. Nothing more, nothing less. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything at all, you come to this place. I don't need anything, I protested, trying to give it back. I was just helping. You don't owe me. Keep it. Her voice carried such authority that my hand closed around the envelope automatically. You never know when life might change. When you might need somewhere to turn. Just remember, this address will always be available to you. But I don't even know your name. She smiled then, a mysterious expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. You'll understand everything when you're ready. Not now, but soon. And then she walked away, moving with more grace and steadiness than someone who'd just been assaulted should have been able to manage. She didn't look back. Within moments, she disappeared into the evening shadows, leaving me standing there with an envelope in my hand and 1,000 questions in my head. I walked home in a daze, the encounter replaying in my mind like a movie I couldn't pause. When I finally reached my tiny studio apartment, I sat on my second-hand couch and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single piece of paper with an address written in elegant script, 14047 Ashford Lane. Come when you're ready. No phone number, no name, no explanation. Just an address and a cryptic invitation. I put the envelope in my desk drawer, telling myself I'd throw it away in the morning. It was probably nothing, just an old woman's eccentric way of saying thank you. Maybe she was lonely and wanted to send a proper gift later. These things happened, right? But when morning came, I didn't throw it away. And when I opened my apartment door to leave for work, I found a package waiting on my doorstep. Medium-sized box, wrapped in simple brown paper with a white ribbon. No delivery label. No return address. No indication of who'd left it there or when. My hands shook as I carried it inside and set it on my kitchen counter. Common sense told me to leave it alone, to call the building manager, to do anything except open a mysterious package from an unknown source. But curiosity, that dangerous, insatiable thing, won out. I untied the ribbon and tore away the paper. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal, the kind with hand-stitched binding and cream-colored pages. Tucked beside it was an elegant fountain pen that felt substantial and expensive in my hand. And underneath both items, written on a small card in the same elegant script, some things cannot be bought with money. Your kindness saved more than you know. This is merely a token of gratitude. Remember the address. You'll need it sooner than you think. I sat down heavily, the journal in my lap, and stared at that card until the words blurred. Who was she? What did she want from me? And why did I have the overwhelming feeling that my normal, ordinary, predictable life had just taken a turn into territory I couldn't begin to understand? The envelope in my drawer suddenly felt like it was burning through the wood, calling to me with questions I couldn't answer. Not yet, but soon. For 2 days I tried to convince myself I wouldn't go to that address. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was how horror movies started. Strange old woman, mysterious gift, cryptic address. These were all red flags wrapped in a package of very bad decisions. I'd probably show up and find myself in the middle of some weird cult ritual or elaborate kidnapping scheme. Yet the envelope sat in my drawer like a splinter under my skin. Impossible to ignore. I'd pull it out during my lunch breaks at work, running my fingers over the elegant handwriting. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning with the address running through my head like a mantra. The journal and pen sat on my nightstand, and every time I looked at them I felt that same pull, that same inexplicable certainty that something important was waiting for me at 4047 Ashford Lane. By Friday evening, my curiosity had evolved into full-blown obsession. I told myself I'd just drive by, just look at the place from the street. I wouldn't stop, wouldn't get out of the car, definitely wouldn't knock on any doors. It would be a quick reconnaissance mission to satisfy my curiosity and prove to myself that this was all perfectly ordinary. I should have known better. I plugged the address into my phone's GPS and followed the directions out of the city, watching as the neighborhoods gradually shifted from cramped apartment complexes to spacious houses with actual yards. The further I drove, the larger the properties became, until I was navigating tree-lined streets where every house looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. When my GPS announced I'd arrived at my destination, I almost drove past it entirely, because calling it a house would have been like calling the ocean a puddle. Behind ornate iron gates stood an estate that took my breath away. The main building was 3 stories of pristine white stone, with columns that belonged on a government building and windows that sparkled in the late afternoon sun. The lawn looked like it had been trimmed with scissors by someone obsessively devoted to perfection. Twin fountains flanked a circular driveway, their water catching the light like liquid diamonds. I sat in my beat-up Honda Civic, hands gripping the steering wheel, and seriously considered the possibility that I'd lost my mind. This couldn't be right. There had to be some mistake. Old ladies who got mugged in parking lots didn't live in places like this. And they definitely didn't invite broke bookstore employees to visit them. Then the gates opened. Slowly, smoothly, like something out of a dream. I hadn't pressed any intercom button. I hadn't announced myself. The gates just opened, as if they'd been waiting for me. As if someone had been watching. My heart launched into my throat. Every instinct I possessed told me to put the car in reverse and get out of there as fast as possible. Instead, I pressed down on the accelerator and drove through. The driveway seemed endless. By the time I reached the front entrance and parked, my hands were slick with sweat and my stomach was doing gymnastics routines. I sat there for a full minute, trying to gather courage I wasn't sure I possessed. Finally, I opened the car door and stepped out onto pavement. That probably cost more per square foot than my monthly rent. Before I could second-guess myself into fleeing, the massive front door swung open. And there she was, the elderly woman from the parking lot, but transformed. She wore an elegant dress that probably had a designer label I'd never heard of. Her hair was perfectly styled. She stood in that doorway with the bearing of someone who owned not just this house but probably half the city. "Aiden," she said, and the sound of my name in her voice sent chills down my spine. "I knew you would come. How do you know my name?" The question came out more accusatory than I'd intended. She smiled. "I make it my business to know things about people who interest me. Please, come inside. We have much to discuss." I should have run. Should have demanded answers right there on the doorstep. Should have done literally anything except follow her into that palatial house. But I followed her anyway. The interior was even more overwhelming than the exterior. We walked through a foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that looked like it cost more than my entire life's earnings. Paintings lined the walls, real art, the kind you see roped off in museums. Everything gleamed with the particular shine that comes from having people whose entire job is to keep things gleaming. She led me to a sitting room that could have comfortably held my apartment 3 times over. The furniture looked antique, and probably was. She gestured for me to sit on a velvet sofa that felt like sitting on a cloud. "I imagine you have questions," she said, settling into a high-backed chair across from me with the grace of someone who'd been wealthy their entire life. "About $1 million, I managed. "Then let me start by introducing myself properly. My name is Evelyn Harlow." She paused, watching my face as if the name should mean something. When I showed no recognition, she continued. "My late husband built an empire, real estate, investments, technology firms. When he passed 5 years ago, everything came to me. But we never had children. No biological heirs to continue what we built." I nodded, unsure where this was going, but increasingly certain I wasn't going to like it. "That day in the parking lot," Evelyn continued, "you showed me something I've been searching for across countless interactions with countless people. You showed me genuine character, courage despite fear, compassion with no expectation of reward. These qualities are rarer than you might think, Aiden, especially in the circles I typically inhabit. I appreciate that, but I still don't understand what you want from me." Her dark eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made me want to look away. "I want to offer you an opportunity that will change your life completely. My estate, my fortune, my legacy. I want to place it in the hands of someone who will use it wisely. Someone good. Someone like you." My mouth went dry. "You're saying you want to give me your money? Just like that? That's insane." "Not give," she corrected gently. "Offer. With one condition that you must fulfill." And there it was. The catch. The hook hidden beneath the bait. "What condition?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Evelyn folded her hands in her lap, and for the first time I saw something like vulnerability in her expression. "You must marry my grandson." The world tilted sideways. "I'm sorry, what?" "My grandson, Clinton. He's been managing our international operations for the past 3 years. He's brilliant, successful, and completely devoted to preserving everything his grandfather built. But he needs someone beside him. Someone genuine. Someone who understands what truly matters in life." "You want me to marry someone I've never met?" I stood up, the absurdity finally breaking through my shock. This is crazy. I should go. I shouldn't have come here. Sit down, Aiden. Her voice carried such command that I found myself sitting before I consciously decided to. I'm not asking you to decide right now. Take 2 days. Think about what your life is currently. Think about what it could be. Clinton arrives from Singapore on Sunday evening. Meet him, talk to him, then decide. This is insane. I repeated, but the words came out weaker this time. Perhaps. Evelyn agreed. But sometimes the most transformative opportunities appear insane at first glance. 2 days, Aiden. That's all I ask. Just think about it. I left that house in a fugue state, drove home on autopilot, and didn't remember a single moment of the journey. When I collapsed onto my couch with the contract she'd pressed into my hands, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Think carefully, Aiden. This isn't just about money. It's about choosing who you want to become. I stared at my cracked ceiling, at the water stain I'd been meaning to report for months, at the life I'd built that felt so small and temporary. Was I really desperate enough to consider this? Was I really brave enough to say yes? I didn't sleep that night, and when Sunday morning arrived, I still hadn't found my answer. Sunday morning arrived with gray skies that matched my mood perfectly. I'd spent the entire weekend in a state of paralysis, unable to make a decision that felt increasingly impossible. Part of me kept expecting to wake up and discover this had all been some elaborate dream. But the contract sat on my coffee table, very real, very legal, and very insane. Around noon my phone vibrated with a message from Evelyn's number. Clinton's flight lands at 4. They'll be at the estate by 6. Come for dinner. No pressure, just meet him. Just meet him. As if meeting the man I was potentially supposed to marry was a casual event like grabbing coffee. I spent 3 hours trying to decide what to wear. Everything I owned suddenly seemed shabby and inadequate. I finally settled on my only dress shirt and the one pair of pants that didn't have visible wear at the knees. Looking in my bathroom mirror, I barely recognized the anxious person staring back at me. The drive to the estate felt both too long and not long enough. When I arrived, the guard at the gate greeted me by name. "Good evening, Mr. Quinn," and waved me through like I was expected. Like I belonged there. I definitely didn't belong there. Evelyn met me at the door, wearing an expression of cautious optimism. "He's in the study," she said quietly. "Be yourself, Aiden. That's all I ask." She led me through corridors I hadn't seen on my first visit. Finally stopping before a heavy wooden door, she knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response. The study was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a desk that looked like it had witnessed a century of important decisions. But I barely registered any of that, because standing by the window silhouetted against the dimming evening light was Clinton. He turned as we entered and I felt my breath catch. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair styled with precision that suggested he paid someone a lot of money to make it look that perfect. His suit was charcoal gray, fitted in a way that probably required a tailor. But it was his face that stopped me cold. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from marble, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to glow even in the study's dim lighting. He was, objectively speaking, the most attractive man I'd ever seen in person. He was also looking at me like I was a problem he needed to solve. "You must be Aiden." His voice was deep, measured, carrying an accent that suggested expensive boarding schools and time spent abroad. He didn't move from his position by the window, didn't offer to shake my hand, just assessed me with clinical precision. "Yeah. Yes. That's me." Brilliant opening. Really nailing this first impression. "My grandmother tells me you're considering her proposal." He said it the way someone might discuss weather patterns or stock prices. Completely detached. Utterly professional. "I'm considering it," I said carefully, "though I'm not sure I understand why you'd agree to this." Something flickered across his face. Surprise maybe that I'd questioned him. "Sit down. Let's talk honestly." Evelyn had disappeared at some point, leaving us alone. Clinton moved to the desk, gesturing to one of the leather chairs across from it. I sat, feeling like a student called to the principal's office. He poured 2 glasses of what was probably very expensive whiskey, sliding one across the desk to me before settling into his own chair. He didn't speak immediately, just studied me with those unsettling blue eyes. Finally, My grandmother thinks you're special. That's rare. She's an exceptional judge of character, and if she believes in you, there's probably a good reason. However, I need to understand something. What do you actually want out of this arrangement? The question was so direct it threw me off balance. Honestly, I don't know. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that this is even happening. Fair enough. He took a sip of his whiskey. Let me be equally honest. I don't need a romantic partner. I don't have time for relationships, genuine feelings, or any of the complications that come with traditional marriage. What I need is someone who can fulfill a role, attend events, present the right image, help maintain the legacy my grandparents built. In return, you'd be compensated generously, so I'd be an employee, I said flatly. A partner, he corrected, with significant benefits, financial security for life, access to resources most people only dream about, the opportunity to be part of something larger than yourself. I should have been offended, should have stood up and walked out, but something about his brutal honesty was almost refreshing after Evelyn's more emotional appeal. Why do you need someone at all? I asked. You seem perfectly capable of handling things alone. For the first time, something like genuine emotion crossed his face. He set down his glass and leaned forward slightly. Because my grandmother is dying. The words hit me like cold water. What? She has maybe 2 years, 3 if we're lucky. The doctors have tried everything. His voice remained steady, but I could see the tightness around his eyes. She spent her entire life building this empire with my grandfather. She watched me grow up in this world, groomed me to take over, but she's terrified I'll lose myself in the business, that I'll forget what actually matters. She thinks having someone like you, someone good, someone grounded, will keep me human. I sat back in my chair, processing this new information. So this is really for her? Yes. He didn't embellish or try to sell it, just stated the fact. And after she's gone? Clinton picked up a file folder from his desk and slid it toward me. This is the actual contract. 2-year commitment, starting from the date of marriage, renewable if both parties agree, but with a clean exit option after those 2 years. You'd receive a monthly allowance, housing, and a substantial settlement regardless of whether we continue the arrangement. All legal, all binding, all contingent on you playing your part convincingly when needed. I opened the folder with shaking hands. The numbers on the first page made my vision blur. The monthly allowance alone was more than I made in 6 months at the bookstore. This is too much, I whispered. It's what you're worth to this family. Clinton's tone remained neutral. The question is whether you're willing to accept it. I looked up at him, at this stranger with his perfect suit and his guarded eyes and his dying grandmother's last wish weighing on his shoulders. Can I ask you something personal? He raised an eyebrow. You can ask. Do you even want to get married? To anyone, I mean under any circumstances. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, want isn't relevant. This is about duty. About honoring the woman who raised me after my parents died. About preserving something important. My personal desires don't factor into the equation. There was something almost tragic about that statement. Something that made me see past the cold exterior to the pressure he carried. I need more time, I said finally. This is a lot to process. Of course. He stood and the meeting was clearly over. Take the weekend. Give my grandmother your answer Monday morning. I stood as well, still holding the contract. At the door I paused and looked back at him. If I did say yes, I said slowly, would you treat me like a person? Or just a business arrangement? Clinton's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I don't know you well enough to answer that yet, but I can promise I'd try to be fair. It wasn't a romantic answer, wasn't even a particularly warm one, but it was honest, and somehow that mattered more. I drove home with the contract on my passenger seat and Clinton's words echoing in my head. That night I opened my laptop and typed out 2 lists. Reasons to say yes, reasons to say no. The no list was longer, more rational, backed by common sense and self-preservation instincts. But the yes list had one entry that outweighed everything else. What if this is the only chance to become someone different? Someone more? When Monday morning came, I picked up my phone with trembling fingers and sent a text to Evelyn's number. I'll do it. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, Clinton will send a car at noon. Welcome to the family, Aiden. I set the phone down and stared at my reflection in the dark screen. What had I just agreed to? I thought getting married would involve weeks of preparation, discussions about venues, awkward family dinners, maybe some counseling sessions. I was wrong about everything. The morning after I sent that text to Evelyn, a car arrived at my apartment. Not a regular car, a sleek black town car with a driver who opened the door for me like I was someone important. Inside, I found a note in Evelyn's handwriting. Courthouse, 2 o'clock, dress appropriately. That was it. No ceremony planning, no guest list discussions, just a time and a place. I spent the morning in a panic, trying on every combination of clothes I owned before settling on my interview suit, the only formal wear I possessed. It was slightly too tight in the shoulders and the pants were a bit short, but it was the best I could manage on zero notice. When the car pulled up to the courthouse, I saw Clinton already waiting on the steps. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, his posture rigid as he checked his watch. When he saw me approaching, his expression didn't change. Not disappointed, not pleased, just neutral. "Ready?" he asked, as if we were about to sign a business contract rather than marriage papers. "Not even a little bit," I admitted. Something almost like amusement flickered across his face. "At least you're honest." Inside, the courthouse was exactly what you'd expect. Fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, and the faint smell of industrial cleaner. We followed signs to the marriage license office, where Evelyn was already waiting with 2 people I didn't recognize. "Witnesses," she explained, gesturing to them. "Required by law." The whole process took less than 30 minutes. We filled out forms, presented identification, paid a fee. The clerk barely looked at us, just stamped papers with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Then we were led to a small room with fake wood paneling and a flag in the corner. A judge entered, middle-aged woman with reading glasses and a tired smile, and opened a binder. "This will be brief," she assured us. "Please face each other." Clinton turned to me, his blue eyes unreadable. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to convince myself this was fine, this was just a formality. This didn't mean anything real. The judge began reading from her binder. The words washed over me. Standard vows, legal terminology, phrases about lawful marriage and binding commitment. It all felt surreal, like I was watching this happen to someone else. "Clinton Harlow, do you take Aidan Quinn to be your lawfully wedded spouse?" Clinton's voice was steady, motionless. "I do." 2 words. That's all it took to change everything. The judge turned to me. "Aidan Quinn, do you take Clinton Harlow to be your lawfully wedded spouse?" My throat closed up. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that I should run, that normal people didn't do things like this. But then I looked at Evelyn standing in the corner, hope written across her face. I looked at Clinton, waiting patiently, his jaw tight with tension he was trying to hide. "I do," I whispered. "By the authority vested in me by the state, I now pronounce you legally married." The judge closed her binder with a snap. "Congratulations." That was it. No kiss, no celebration, no dramatic moments. Just signatures on documents and a handshake from the judge before she moved on to her next appointment. Outside, Evelyn pulled me into a hug that felt like the only genuine emotion in the entire proceeding. "Welcome to the family, dear," she murmured. "I know this seems strange now, but trust me, you've made the right choice." Clinton had already started walking toward the car, phone pressed to his ear, apparently taking a business call minutes after getting married. I watched him go, wondering what I'd just committed myself to. The estate felt different when I moved in 3 days later. My room turned out to be an entire wing bedroom larger than my old apartment's, bathroom with a soaking tub and separate shower, a walk-in closet that echoed when I stepped inside because I didn't own enough clothes to fill even a corner of it. "Mr. Clinton's quarters are in the east wing," the housekeeper explained as she showed me around. "You'll have complete privacy here. There's an intercom system if you need anything." Complete privacy. Translation: we'd be living separate lives under the same roof. I barely saw Clinton during those first weeks. He left early for his office downtown. Returned late, if he returned at all. Sometimes I'd hear his car pulling into the garage around midnight. Other times I'd check the driveway in the morning and see his parking spot still empty. We were strangers who happened to share an address and a marriage certificate. Then, 3 weeks in, everything shifted. I couldn't sleep one night, too many thoughts spinning through my head about this bizarre new life I'd stumbled into. Around 2 in the morning, I wandered down to the kitchen for water, expecting the house to be empty and dark. Instead, I found Clinton sitting at the kitchen island, still wearing his dress shirt but with the tie gone and sleeves rolled up. A tumbler of amber liquid sat in front of him, ice cubes melting slowly. He was staring out the window at the dark garden, lost in thought. "Oh," I said, freezing in the doorway. "I didn't know anyone was up." He glanced over his shoulder. "Can't sleep either?" Something like that. I moved cautiously into the kitchen, suddenly aware that this was the first real conversation we'd had since the courthouse. "Pour yourself a drink," he said, nodding toward the cabinet. "Might help." I retrieved a glass and poured 2 fingers of what turned out to be very smooth, very expensive whiskey. Clinton gestured to the stool beside him and I sat, leaving a careful distance between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence should have been awkward, but somehow it wasn't. Just 2 people awake when the rest of the world slept, sharing space without expectations. "Can I tell you something?" Clinton asked suddenly. "Sure." He stared into his glass. "I didn't want this either. The marriage, the arrangement. I would have been fine handling everything alone." His honesty caught me off guard. "Then why agree to it?" "Because Evelyn asked me to." He took a slow sip of whiskey. "My parents died when I was 8. Car accident on a rainy night. Evelyn and my grandfather took me in, raised me as their own. Evelyn spent years making sure I had everything I needed, that I grew up stable and secure despite the trauma. When she told me she wanted this, that it mattered to her," he trailed off, shrugging. "I couldn't say no." I sat with that information, understanding clicking into place. "So we're both here for her, essentially." He finally looked at me directly. "But that doesn't mean we can't make this bearable. We don't have to be friends, Aiden. But we don't have to be adversaries either." "What would we be then?" Clinton considered the question. "Partners, I suppose. In the most practical sense. We're stuck with each other for at least 2 years. Might as well not make it miserable." It wasn't a warm offer, wasn't even particularly friendly, but it was something an olive branch extended in his own cold, pragmatic way. "I can work with that," I said. He nodded once, then stood, placing his empty glass in the sink. At the doorway he paused. "If you need anything, anything at all, ask. We might be strangers, but we're legally bound now. That means something even if it's just contractual." Then he was gone, footsteps fading down the corridor. I sat alone in that massive kitchen, whiskey warming my chest and thought that maybe, just maybe, this arrangement wouldn't be completely unbearable. I had no idea how wrong I was. The first month passed in a blur of polite distance and careful avoidance. Clinton kept to his routine: early departures, late returns, entire days where I'd only know he was home because I'd hear his shower running or see his coffee cup in the sink. I kept to mine, exploring the estate grounds, reading in the library, trying to figure out what exactly I was supposed to do with myself in this strange new life. Then small things started happening. First was the laptop. I came back to my room one afternoon to find a brand new MacBook Pro sitting on my desk, still in its box. A sticky note was attached. "Your old one was dying. Consider this a necessity, not a gift." I stared at that note for a long time, trying to decode what it meant. Was this kindness? Practicality? Or just Clinton being efficient about household logistics? A week later, I mentioned in passing during one of our rare breakfast overlaps that I'd been searching online for a particular book, a first edition poetry collection that had been out of print for decades. I didn't think he was even listening. He'd been scrolling through emails on his tablet, barely acknowledging my presence. The next morning, the book sat on the kitchen counter with my name on a bookmark. No note this time. No explanation, just the book I'd wanted, acquired through whatever expensive channels people like Clinton had access to. I carried it to my room, running my fingers over the aged cover, and felt something warm and confusing bloom in my chest. 2 weeks after that, I discovered Clinton's secret. It was a Saturday, rare for him to be home during daylight hours. I was in the garden sitting on a stone bench near the rose bushes when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. Clinton appeared around the hedge, wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt. I'd never seen him in anything but suits and business casual. The transformation was startling. He looked younger, more approachable, almost like a normal person instead of a corporate executive. "Didn't expect to find you out here," he said. I could say the same thing. I gestured to the empty space beside me. Taking a break from world domination, a smile tugged at his lips. Barely there but genuine. He sat down, maintaining a respectful distance, and leaned back against the bench. "I used to hide here when I was younger," he said after a moment. "Whenever Evelyn wanted me to practice piano or study extra hours, I'd sneak out here and pretend I was somewhere else entirely." The confession surprised me. "Were you a rebellious kid?" "Not even remotely." He laughed, a short, self-deprecating sound. "I was painfully well-behaved. Straight A's, perfect attendance, never broke a single rule. Incredibly dull. And now, still dull." He turned to look at me, something playful in his expression. "Just dull with more money and responsibilities." I laughed before I could stop myself. It was the first time we'd had anything resembling normal conversation, and it felt surprisingly easy. "You're not dull," I said. "You barely know me." "True. But I'm learning." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. He held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary before looking away. After that day, Clinton started coming home earlier. Dinner became a regular thing. Not formal, not planned, just both of us ending up in the kitchen around the same time, heating up whatever the housekeeper had prepared, sitting at the island to eat. We talked about inconsequential things. Favorite movies. Worst travel experiences. The weirdest food we'd ever tried. Clinton told me about growing up in boarding schools. About learning to navigate high society while feeling like an outsider. I told him about my childhood in a small town. About working 3 jobs to afford community college. With every conversation, the walls between us lowered incrementally. One evening we ended up on the terrace after dinner. The night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights in the distance. I made some stupid joke, can't even remember what it was, and Clinton laughed. Really laughed. Not the polite chuckle he usually gave. The sound did something to my heart I wasn't prepared for. I glanced at him, at the way his face transformed when he genuinely smiled, and felt my pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude or friendship. "Oh no," I thought. "This is bad." The jacket incident happened on a Thursday. We'd been walking through the garden after dark, discussing some documentary we'd both watched, when the temperature dropped suddenly. I shivered, pulling my thin sweater tighter. Without a word, Clinton shrugged off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. His fingers brushed the back of my neck, the barest contact, lasting maybe half a second, and I felt electricity shoot down my spine. I looked up at him, startled, but he was already adjusting the collar, acting like nothing significant had happened. Like he hadn't just made my entire body hyper-aware of his proximity. "Thanks," I managed. "You're welcome." But his voice sounded slightly strained, and when our eyes met briefly I saw something there, something heated and quickly shuddered away. Was I imagining it? Was I projecting my own developing feelings onto him? I didn't know, and that uncertainty was terrifying. The announcement came during dinner on a Sunday night. Evelyn joined us, a rare occurrence lately, and dropped her bombshell between the salad and main course. "The annual charity gala is in 2 weeks, she said, smiling at both of us. "It's a major event. Media coverage, important donors, everyone who matters in our social circle. You'll both need to attend together as a married couple." My fork clattered against my plate. "In public? Like actually pretending we're—" "You're not pretending," Evelyn interrupted gently. "You are married. This is simply your first public appearance as such." Clinton's expression remained neutral, but I saw his jaw tighten slightly. "We'll handle it." After Evelyn left, I turned to him. "I don't know how to act at those kinds of events. I'll mess this up." "You won't." His tone was reassuring but firm. "Just stay close to me. Let me handle the conversations. Smile when appropriate. It'll be fine." But it wouldn't be fine, because spending an entire evening pretending to be in love with Clinton while developing actual feelings for him was a recipe for disaster. "What if people can tell it's fake?" I asked quietly. Clinton looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then we'll just have to make sure it doesn't look fake. The implications of that statement hung between us, heavy and complicated. I went to bed that night knowing everything was about to change, and having no idea if I was ready for it. The night of the gala arrived with all the weight of an impending storm. Evelyn had arranged for a stylist to come to the estate, and I spent 3 hours being transformed into someone I barely recognized. The tuxedo they fitted me with was custom black, perfectly tailored to measurements they must have taken while I wasn't paying attention. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who belonged in Clinton's world, even though I knew it was just an illusion. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I adjusted my bow tie for the 10th time. A knock at my door made me jump. "Come in," I called. Clinton entered, and I forgot how to breathe. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that made his eyes look impossibly brighter. His hair was styled with that perfect casual precision that probably took significant effort to achieve. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread, wealthy, powerful, untouchable, until he saw me. He stopped mid-step, his polished composure cracking for just a moment. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly before he recovered, clearing his throat. "You look good," he said, and there was something in his voice, a roughness that hadn't been there before. "So do you," I replied, then immediately felt stupid for such an inadequate response. The car ride to the venue was silent, but it was charged with an energy I couldn't name. Clinton sat across from me in the limousine, his gaze occasionally flickering in my direction before quickly moving away. His fingers drummed against his knee, a nervous gesture I'd never seen from him before. "Listen," he said as we approached the venue. "I know you're anxious, but remember, I won't let anything happen that makes you uncomfortable. If you need to leave, just tell me. We'll make an excuse and go." The protective note in his voice made my chest tight. "Thank you. We're in this together," he said simply. Whatever happens tonight, the ballroom was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers casting warm light over hundreds of people in formal wear. A string quartet playing in one corner, servers gliding through the crowd with champagne and hors d'oeuvre. The moment we entered, I felt eyes turning toward us. "They're staring," I whispered to Clinton. "Let them." His hand found the small of my back, warm, steady, grounding. "Hold your head up. You belong here as much as anyone." We made our way through the crowd, Clinton introducing me to what felt like hundreds of people. Business partners, socialites, politicians. I smiled until my face hurt, shook hands until my palm ached, and tried desperately not to embarrass him. Then the music changed. A slow waltz beginning, and couples moved toward the dance floor. Clinton turned to me, extending his hand with a slight bow. "May I have this dance? I've never waltzed in my life," I confessed. "Then it's time you learned." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Trust me." On the dance floor, he positioned my hands properly, one on his shoulder, the other clasped in his. His other hand settled on my waist, and suddenly the rest of the room faded away. "Just follow my lead," he murmured. "Listen to the rhythm. 3-4 time. Step, step, close." We moved, and to my surprise, I didn't stumble. Clinton guided me effortlessly, his movements smooth and confident. I focused on staying in sync with him, letting him lead, and gradually found myself relaxing into the dance. "You're doing well," he said softly. I looked up at him and found his eyes already on my face, intense and focused in a way that made my breath catch. This close, I could see the darker ring around his irises, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way his lips parted slightly as he gazed down at me. "People are watching us," I managed to say. "Good. Let them see that I married someone worth marrying." The words hit me like a physical thing. "You don't have to say things like that. I'm not saying it for the audience." His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the crowd around us. "I'm saying it because it's true. You're not what I expected, Aiden. You're." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Clint, I know this started as an arrangement," he continued, his hand tightening slightly on my waist. "I know we agreed to keep this practical and emotionless. But somewhere along the way, something changed for me, and I don't know what to do about it." The song ended, but neither of us moved apart. We stood there in the middle of the dance floor, other couples swirling around us, locked in our own private bubble. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "I'm saying that pretending to be in love with you is getting harder because I'm not sure I'm pretending anymore." The drive home was torturous. We sat in heavy silence, the confession hanging between us like a third passenger. I kept replaying his words, trying to understand what they meant, what he wanted from me, what I wanted from this situation that had spiraled so far beyond my expectations. When the car pulled through the estate gates, Clinton finally spoke. "I shouldn't have said that. I apologize if I made you uncomfortable." "You didn't," I said quickly. "You just surprised me." "Surprised you how?" I took a deep breath, knowing this was a crossroads moment. I could deflect, play it safe, maintain the careful distance we'd established. Or I could be honest. Because I thought I was the only one feeling that way, I admitted. Clinton's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide with shock. "What? The past month, maybe longer. I don't know when it started. But somewhere between the midnight kitchen conversations and the thoughtful gifts and the way you smile when you think no one's watching, I stopped thinking of this as just an arrangement. Aiden, I know this complicates everything." I rushed on. "I know it wasn't part of the plan, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel something real when you're near me. And tonight, when we were dancing, when you looked at me like I actually mattered," I trailed off, unable to finish. The car stopped. We were home, but neither of us moved to exit. Clinton reached across the space between us, his hand cupping my face with a gentleness that made my throat tight. His thumb brushed my cheekbone and I leaned into the touch without thinking. "This changes everything," he said softly. "I know. The contract, the timeline, the rules we set, none of it accounts for this." "I know." He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching mine. "I need time to think about what this means. What we do next. Can you give me that?" Even though disappointment rushed through me, I nodded. "Take whatever time you need." He climbed out of the car, then paused at my door. "For what it's worth, Aiden, I'm glad you told me. And I'm glad I'm not alone in feeling this way." I watched him walk into the house and sat alone in the darkness of the car, my heart racing and my future suddenly, terrifyingly uncertain. Everything had changed, and there was no going back to simple arrangements and emotional distance. Whatever happened next, it would be real. And that scared me more than anything else had.